Hi everyone, welcome to SailGP today. In today's episode, we spoke about a number of different things, the equality across the league in season 5. We spoke about our new Florida training camp. We spoke about the new arrivals in the league, Artemis, and the crazy transfer window. We also spoke about who we think are going to do well next year and who we think are going to struggle. Enjoy the episode. Stevie, where are you dialing in from today in that incredible shirt?
Yes, well, yeah, no, I'm in Miami, so a bit of Florida. There's a lot of sailing regattas out here this time of year, so working with the team out here, and yeah, it felt fitting to wear a proper kind of, Floridian shirt.
Speaking of Florida, we'll get on to Florida later. It's going to play a key part in our chat today. But first, I just wanted to reflect on 2025 and season 5 of SailGP and think about how equal it seemed across the whole season. There's a lot of parity across the season. We had 8 teams winning events. And looking ahead into 2026, I just wanted to touch on that and kind of think, are we going to see the same trend next season as we have before? And what is the reason for all these teams seeming so close?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ultimately, the reason is it's a very, very short race course, and the start, which is coming down to split-second decisions, is very definitive to the end result. So, you have a kind of a little bit of a run of form, and you can really sort of put together a few results. And of course, just as the people are getting more time in the boat, when we started this, there was a few of the athletes that had done quite a lot of sailing in an F50. So you're looking at Tom Slingsby, Ian Jensen, people like that from a few of those top teams had done a lot of time in the boat. Now everyone's done more time. There's more new equipment coming. We had the T-foils come in last year. We had, the 27-meter wing got kind of, I mean, what's the right word here? Given to the teams, but you could also say kind of dropped on the teams, like literally just in Cadiz, one event before Abu Dhabi. So it's become a real question of learning the new equipment, understanding these technological changes, but then add that to the fact that it is a very short race. There's a lot of in an individual race, there's quite a lot of jeopardy over the season, as we've seen. Black foils, the Bonds Flying Roos have always made those finals when they've been around the grand final at the end of the season. The British and the Spanish have, been right in the mix. So the cream rises to the top when you have enough races. But, when these events come down to one 12-minute race and can ultimately come down to one split-second decision in that start box, then, they're all the best sailors in the world. And they've now got the skills in the boat to actually, execute the right maneuver at the right time. And that means we're seeing different people win, which is, I personally just found awesome.
Yeah, and it also seemed, season 5 was a journey, a narrative that kind of had different teams rising and falling at different elements of the season. Obviously, you had that APAC leg at the beginning of the season through to the American leg, and then obviously the European leg at the end. And take Canada, for example, they started the season really well, ended quite badly. It's really interesting how the success of the teams ebbs and flows throughout the season. Obviously, as you mentioned, with all the different bits of tech that's thrown at them throughout the duration of the season as well. Are there any teams that you think will particularly dominate in 2026?
No, I mean, to that point, I think, what we definitely do see is that certain teams have certain strengths in different wind conditions. So, and we'll come on to it. We've got this sort of super exciting calendar ahead of us for season 6 with some new venues that will be interesting and some old favourites. But the conditions make a bit of a difference. And Canada was a great example of that, really. The flat water, kind of relatively steady conditions we had in LA, and even we had a little bit in San Fran. It kind of gave Giles and that Canadian team the space on the race course to use his sort of perhaps bigger picture sailing skills and classical racing types strategy and things like that. Whereas these tight courses, the Street Fighter type course, I think quite suits someone like Dylan Fletcher. He's quite a punchy guy. He's quite a hyperactive guy. If you're around him, there's a lot of energy, and I think he really enjoys that tight, as I say, kind of a Street Fighter race course. So I think the different courses will suit some of the different teams, and just, it is sport. There's just that question of being on form, being confident. I feel like the Canadians lost the confidence, especially in the pre-start, started maybe second guessing themselves. And as I say, it's split second. If you're not 100% sure when I've got to pull the trigger at that start line, turn the boat, try and build the speed up onto the foils, suddenly you're 2 or 3 meters back. And at this level, that's just not good enough.
Yeah, and I also feel that there's a lot to be said for the team cohesion as well. And we've got a lot of movement and a lot of new faces in the league this year, or faces that are popping up in different teams from other teams. And I think that team cohesion really has something to be said across the course of the year. Like, sometimes for me, I'm like, oh, how can they even worry about whether they've got 27.5-meter wing if things aren't clicking on board in the first place? It's like a whole nother dynamic to consider. And do you think that also plays quite a big part across the season? You get used to your teammates, you get used to people's roles on the boat and how people react in certain situations. And by the end of it, you're kind of firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I certainly think in certain roles, I think again we often are drawn to the what I'd call the big three on the boat: the driver, the wing trimmer, and the flight controller. And again, you look at the British last season, which was Ian Jensen and Luke Parkinson. Dylan came in as a newbie. All right, he'd done quite a lot, but Gooby and Parker, I mean, it's almost telepathic. The amount they've done together. Jason Waterhouse and Tom Slingsby, they've got that sort of instinctive understanding. Florian and Diego. There's a lot of these teams where they've had that just natural, almost just like I say, almost a spiritual connection with each other, where they understand what they're going to do next. They're completely aligned, and when one move happens, the other person's already anticipating. So I think that sort of cohesion as a team is huge. And I guess you must as well. Some of the grinders are often the big characters in the team that will keep the team together, get them motivated. Even if they're not on the boat. I saw a really interesting interview with Peter Burling the other day. He was asked, or not an interview, it was on Instagram, I think, and it was saying, who's got the hardest job on the boat? And he was saying that some of the sailors that when they're not on the boat, he wouldn't be able to handle that being in the rib and watching. And I think that's sort of some of the unseen stuff we don't know, is how those, Kinley Fowler, he's often off the boat for the racing, but when you go back and listen to their sort of team comms, he's feeding all the information. He's keeping that positivity going in the boat. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Team cohesion, it's a long season. It's a lot of travel. You're going to get tired. You're going to have some ups and downs. There's an awful lot of pressure now. If you're the person that makes a mistake in one of those final races and you're costing people $200,000-$300,000 now, I mean, I don't know. You're going to be annoyed, aren't you?
Yeah,
So if you can, keep that team unity together and keep that all going, then that is going to, be really, really important.
It's a huge amount of pressure, and also kind of the winning formula is obviously time on the boat. And traditionally, there's not been a huge amount of time on the boat for the teams. You get that bit of training at the start of the year, and then at various events throughout the year, you get those couple of days before racing. But we obviously heard, which brings Florida, where you are, into the question, that we're going to be SailGP teaming up with American Magic and confirming a long-term deal to set up the first training base for SailGP and the F50s. I think that's going to be an incredible result for people to get that team cohesion and kind of get that time on the water that's essential to racing the F50s, right?
I mean, it's absolutely awesome because, they just don't get enough time. So the standard that they're sailing the boats at is really, really good. But the ceiling for what's possible in these boats, I mean, that's so exciting to think what we might be able to do. And by them having the time in the boat, it gets that. I think it's phenomenal because the slight problem we've got this year, you talked about the transfers, and there's been a lot of regurgitating of the same talent. So we've got a lot of phenomenal sailors, but we've also got a lot of sailors in the league who are the only ones that have ever used the flight control and have used the wing. So how good are they? They're better than people that have never done it before. Yes, they're clearly phenomenal sailors. I mean, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but you look at the French team. There's a young guy called Enzo Boulanger coming in, who's a Moth World champion. He won't have had any time on an F50. So you can have all the talent in the world, but if you've never actually got your hands on the tools and had a go at doing it, you're not going to be as good as the next person. So by having this training base, and that will allow the teams to bring in some new talent, it'll allow them to hone their own team. But I think, you'll probably ask me next, who's this the most important for? I know that, I can see you looking down on your list. And that's a great question. And I think the interesting thing is I think it's all the teams. Because if you're the Bonds Flying Roos, you've just done a deal with Hugh Jackman, with Ryan Reynolds, with
Yeah.
Bonds. They're clearly investing in the future. That people like that won't be investing in the Bonds Flying Roos for a 1 year, 2 year thing. They're looking long term. And again, I'm not on site, so I don't need to worry about saying this. But Tom Slingsby's not getting any younger. Jason Waterhouse isn't getting well. I know, but it's true. I mean, he's younger than me, and he always will be.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
that's good news for Tom. But he's got to be looking. Well, what happens? What happens if Tom's injured or
Yeah,
Jason's
no, you're right.
injured or something? That they've got no backup.
Yeah.
If something happens to any of those, they're really struggling. We saw that with Canada and New Zealand last year. They couldn't sail the second day because they didn't have a flight controller that had enough time to feel safe when it's windy.
And now you've got Phil Robertson and Nathan Outteridge driving boats. They can't fill in, so they can't be super subs anymore.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and as and I'd argue we're almost at saturation point in terms of, there's the 13th team which you talk about, and I think we've sort of filled that with some of the talent. You've got kind of Olympic gold medalists like Will Ryan and people like that are now moving where they'll actually probably be on a starting roster rather than as a reserve and things like that. But we're perhaps reaching towards saturation point in terms of the talent. So we've got to get some new sailors in. There's a 14th team being touted. I know they're building a boat. I don't know if they've got a team in the boat just yet, but I know they want a team in the boat. Who's going to sail that boat?
Well,
and without this training base in Pensacola, that we wouldn't be able to do that. So yeah. Anyway, short story long. Absolutely fantastic news that we've got this base set up there, and I think in terms of the future and the longevity of SailGP, it's a massive step.
Well, SailGP MD Andy Thompson was in Pensacola at the training base. Let's hear what he has to say.
This is definitely the next chapter for SailGP. I mean, we've gone through our first 5 seasons. That was very much about establishing SailGP as a sports property. And the next 5 seasons is about how we go much further than that and how we really mature as a business and provide these opportunities for new sailors to get into our league and really new sailors to kind of make themselves as stars on the world stage. So to have this anchor here in Pensacola, Florida is huge for us.
I think what was really interesting about what Andy said there for me, Stevie, is he aligned with you in terms of the long-term vision. I know you mentioned the Bonds Flying Roos, Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, their long-term investment into SailGP. Andy's talking about the next 5 seasons there and creating new opportunities for new sailors and a new pathway. Do you think that's what's been missing as to why we haven't seen a huge amount of new talent coming through constantly into the league?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I totally do. Andy and I haven't had a chat. He doesn't seem to often pick up his phone to check in with me, funnily enough. He seems to be doing just fine as he is. But I completely agree with him. I mean, I think in terms of us growing the sport and growing SailGP, we do need the new talent. We do need new stars coming through because if you look at Diego and Florian, they've got to be the best example, and that's to undermine Juan and all the other people, Joel on that Spanish boat that have made it possible. Nicole at the back. I mean, the whole Spanish team has come in new. They were 4th last year. They were right in the mix. They won in season 4, and they were new. And okay, Diego and Florian, Olympic gold medalists. They're hardly wet behind the ears in terms of sailing talent. But to SailGP, they've come in, they've made the leap, and they're now one of the big players as a team.
Yeah.
But that's not happening very much. You look at some of the talent like Eric Heil on the German team, and okay, they're slowly getting there, but it's a real long process. I think by being able to get in the boat, get some time, try some new talent. Maybe Jason Waterhouse isn't the best flight controller in the world. I think possibly he is.
I'm gonna clip that. I'm clipping that.
Yeah. I'm sure Jason will love that one for his wall. But no, I mean, results wise, he's clearly the man.
Yeah.
But I think we just don't know what the potential is in these boats because they haven't had enough time to sort of to push the limits, to experiment, to try different ways of maneuvering and see where we can go.
You're right. And I always think as well, like when I go to the events and I see some of the rookies, take Arnaud de Planta, for example, with the Swiss team, or Kai Hockley with Emirates Great Britain, I always think you always see them knocking around. And I'm always like, I wonder if they've been on the boat this weekend. And if they haven't, what's that going to feel like? But now they've got this training facility. They're going to be clocking up the hours, and they're going to be going into that grinder role and then figuring out whether they want to be a flight controller, wing trimmer, jib trim, whatever it is role that they end up wanting to do long term. I think that's going to be really beneficial to them. Obviously, we've mentioned it's in Florida, it's in North America. How do you think we're going to maintain that fairness? I know there's some rules in place, Steve, if you want to chat through that.
Yeah, I mean, well, ultimately they're gonna manage the days to ensure that all teams have got that access to it. The teams do have to pay to do this. It's not quite as simple as oh, here you go, this is all nice and easily set up for you. There will be a fee put in for the time or the days you spend using it. But yeah, they're gonna limit it, just because Taylor Canfield and his team live a 3-hour drive away, and Peter Burling and the rest of the Blackfoils are a 12-hour flight. That's not going to have an effect on it. I mean, I'm sure the Blackfoils, for example, will have to be smart with when they manage their training block. You don't want to be doing too many trips around the world when you've got such a busy season. So I suspect when they're in that North American section, that's when I'd plan to put a training block in if I was them anyway. But yes, the league is going to manage the days that they have, that the American team, for example, I only use them because it's in America, and it's obvious that fans might think, oh, wow, that's a huge advantage. That's a bit unfair for the US team. But no, it will be managed. And they will be, allowed a certain number of days per team, and where you fit that in the calendar. I mean, still again, the beauty, the tough thing about our sport. I mean, I don't know exactly what happens if you book a week block and there's not much wind for 3 days, or there's too much wind for a few days. I mean, how that happens, there still might be room for a little bit of lady luck and Mother Nature kind of playing. That was a lot of tacky lines I managed to get in a brief second there, wasn't it?
Lady luck and Mother Nature.
Yeah, I was absolutely firing them out. But yeah, I just think it will be. There'll be people complain. The beauty of high level sport is people have always find something to whinge about.
Yeah,
and
that leads me. I do have a question on that. If you were gonna, because obviously there's quite a few venues, particularly in the last season. Geneva was light winds. Cadiz actually ended up being light winds. There's a few light air events around throughout the season. Would you be looking to practice that 27.5 meter wing, light wind rudder and foil setup, or would you be looking to be practicing those high wind, high speed maneuvers? And like, where are you going to do it? And kind of what part of the season would you looking to improve your training? Are you going to be looking to get it done early so that you've got that practice ready for the rest of the season? You're going to spread it out. How would you approach that, Stevie?
It's a great question. Definitely could do with more than 2 seconds to think about the answer to that one. But I think, I mean, there's some big gaps in the calendar. I can definitely see if you're a team, grand final aspirations kind of team. And again, I'm coming back to Australia, which is a little bit unfair here, but slightly, maybe not unfairly. It's always been a little bit of a weakness, the lighter winds. We obviously had I think 14 kilometers an hour it was in the grand final in Abu Dhabi. And yeah, as you say, we had the new 27.5 meter wings, which was just unbelievable in terms of the performance gain for the boats of how they were getting up on foiling and able to stay on the foil compared to those bigger wings that we used to have. I'd be blocking my little, patch in the calendar in October if I was Tom Slingsby, because that would give me that. There's quite a big gap where it's hard to get sort of time in the boat. You have this almost a 5-6 week block where the whole, the league's got to move from Europe to the Middle East, which isn't, it's not kind of just a plug and unplug kind of job. It's a fairly major pack up, and you've got to ship the boats there, and it takes time.
Shout out to DP World whilst we're talking about the logistics.
DP World, the logistics of that, unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah, it's some machine how we managed to get this league around, but fortunately that's not my problem to have to organise. But yeah, I think I'd be thinking about that. I mean, let's look at some of the new teams. Artemis, I mean, they'd probably be wanting to get in the boat early season so they can hit the ground running. And again, my guess is Artemis are going to be quite strong in the light winds, so I'm sure
Yeah.
they would love it. But the one thing you can't manufacture is the wind conditions you get. That's going to be the potluck, and I don't know the fine details of the contract, but I don't imagine you can look at the forecast and say, right, we're turning up tomorrow because the forecast looks like what we want. I suspect you've got to book your block at least a month in advance and say, right, we've got this window here to come, because, you know, if there's 13 teams all trying to get on the boat, and it'll be 14 teams very soon, then that, you know, there's going to be limitations to it in terms of where you put it in your calendar. But I think the teams will, or should at least, think about it strategically as to when they fit it into their calendar and to what's going to suit them. But Pensacola, brilliant venue. It's probably going to be on average towards the lighter end of the scale wind-wise, which again is probably great news for Australia, and you know, and any training is good training for whichever team you're in. But for some of the teams would, like the US or Mubadala Brazil or anything like that, would probably prefer a bit more wind, a bit more solid foiling conditions. This is all happening really quick. That kind of that vibe.
Well, you mentioned new teams, and we've got a new team with Artemis. You mentioned Artemis. We've also got a few new faces that have made an arrival here at SailGP. The end of the season marked the start of the transfer window. And as you said in one of the previous episodes, Stevie, once one domino went, they all went. We saw 21 athletes join the team or move teams in that period. Shall we chat about some of those moves and what the knock-on effects are? I think if we maybe just start with Artemis, because that's clearly where a lot of the people have gone initially. I think that's very exciting going into Perth, where they're going to be, what they're going to be like, how they're going to approach it. And the only person that can answer that, Stevie, is someone with experience like yourself. I can't answer that question. We have the wind whisperer, Nathan Alteridge, as the driver.
We do have the wind whisperer, that is for sure. But then we are going to Fremantle, and Fremantle is famous for the Fremantle doctor. So as long as it's not the anaesthetist that turns up and puts us all to sleep, then we should be in pretty good shape. I think,
was that your joke?
I'm afraid that was my joke. Yeah, this is sorry to underwhelm, but yes, that was the joke.
Good.
But yeah, no, I mean, the Fremantle doctor, as long as we get that, which, you know, if you look at how it is at the moment, we're sort of a week out right now, and it's looking absolutely fantastic, the conditions out there. I think it will be, in many ways, that'll be quite tough for Artemis, because it's a bit of wind. What windier conditions tends to sort of to suit a pecking order. There's a little bit less jeopardy when it's windy. When it gets lighter, those little fine details, then that's when you can see a little bit more of an up and down. So I'd expect Fremantle actually to be quite by what we'd call the form book. And the form book, what I mean by that is probably the overall results from last season. Where Artemis plug in, we'll see. I think, again, for me, one of the really interesting things is what's the right word? The weak link, and this is going to sound mental, is probably going to be Nathan, ironically, coming back into it, having not raced with 12, 13 boats around for a whole year. They're going to get in the boat, they're going to sail the boat fast, they're going to sail the boat silky smooth. Got no problem with that. But as soon as you put another 12 boats around you, and it's all happening really quick, and you've got to react and make those quick decisions, by mid-season, Nathan will be up and sharp, and it'll be Nathan Outridge. And I'm confident that Artemis, with that, I mean, like you said, you know, all about these transfers, it was the absolute carnage that Nathan and Ian Percy made when they arrived, like a wrecking ball, with Artemis, and just started taking people, you know, Draper from Australia, Maloney from Brazil, you know, Brad Farrand, and, you know, and Julia from Italy as well. And, you know, they've caused an awful lot of this havoc in the transfer season, which has obviously been great. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Nathan gets up to speed with that racing. I think they're going to sail the boat great. The talent they've got, they're like, in my mind, they should be going right into the equation. And if the anaesthetist does turn up, then I expect they'll be pretty good form if it is a bit lighter and sort of subtle conditions.
Well, you're right. I think all of their other team members, with the exception of their new signing Hugo, is it Christensen, new to the league. All the other team members are coming from different teams, so they've got the experience on the T-foils, on the F50s, whereas, as you said, Nathan's kind of coming in a bit cold. He's been around the world on his yacht and getting thrown into a 13 boat lineup, and again another boat on a very small start box is going to be really interesting to see. One of the ones that really stood out to me of the transfers, which we kind of got a glimpse of in Abu Dhabi, was Ed Powys with the Danish, with Rockwool Denmark, coming in and winning that event. He was on board for that last race of the season, the last event of the season. Massive difference, it seemed, with him on board.
Yeah, I mean, Ed's well, he was in another sailing project being coached by me last season, so perhaps no surprise that he jumped straight in with such a performance there. But no, Ed, I've always sorry, that was bad. But but you can leave that in. What I was going to say is I've often called Ed the Swiss Army knife, because he was with that Australian team, and he was in those first few seasons. The unique thing the Aussies had, Waterhouse couldn't do an event. Ed went and did flight control. Carl Langford, when he was wing trimmer for the Aussies, was having a baby. Ed came in and did the wing trim. So he's come in, and I think he was fourth as the wing trimmer with the Aussies, but they came third in Plymouth when he did the flight control. This is back in like season 3, I think, a long time ago now.
Interesting.
But Ed's, he's never quite had the opportunity to, it's always been, put me in, coach, put me in, whereas now he's actually, he's out there. And I don't imagine that was a total coincidence that suddenly the Danish had that sort of calmer, calculated feel to them, because I know that's the kind of thing Ed can bring to the boat. And he's one of the rare characters in the league who's been around the league since the beginning. Perhaps has never quite had that, that opportunity to show how good he is, and this is his chance. And let's see. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's going to be quite a big few days out in Perth if you're a flight controller and you've not had an awful lot of time yet. It was fairly ideal conditions in Abu Dhabi to bed yourself in. Lighter. I mean, the first day I don't even know if they did foil, but certainly on that second day, you could see they were getting the swing of things. And actually, interestingly, he had clearly some slightly different ideas on the setup, because we can all look at the data on all the teams, if you remember, and actually they were using the foils a little bit differently. So again, I'm sure that's the coaching staff and the analysts in the background, but it'll be Ed working with them, and it's him that's got to go and execute. So yeah, I think a good signing for Rockwool Denmark, and if I'm honest, until that last event, they had really, I suppose, disappointed me, to be honest, because I rate Nikolai and Tom and Raz when I really rated that Danish team. But I think, to come back to your point right at the beginning of this, that team chemistry wasn't quite there. A few bad results. Who's to blame? Is someone to blame? That whole negativity can come on it. And I think they were perhaps a victim of that, because I really thought they were going to be challenging for the grand final, and they were miles off. But with the shackles off, new person in the team, maybe that little bit of freedom and an opportunity to sort of express yourself, then they were just dominant in Abu Dhabi, which was great for them, great for the league, and could be a can of worms opened for next season.
I think also something that's quite, I mean, if we touch on wing trimmers, the big one for me that stands out, that's going to be really interesting on both sides, is Goobs, Ian Jensen and Stu Bithell, their switch. So Ian to Oz and Stu to Emirates Great Britain, reuniting with Dylan. I know we touched on this last time we spoke to Stu, but that's going to be really interesting to see in this first event in Perth, how those relationships pan out. I mean, homecoming for Ian Jensen, it's going to be really cool to see him back with Tom Slingsby, with his home country, the Australians. But Stu and Dylan's relationship already on social seems to be quite good, and quite you see a bit of a different side to Dylan when he's around Stu, by the looks of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to be too kind of serious and locked in when Stuart's around. Is my take on things. I mean, he's in the UK. He's from up north in the UK, and they're renowned for a very good sense of humour. Normally, quite a dry sense of humour, and Stuart kind of gives that well. But yeah, it is. I mean, if I'm perfectly honest, the athlete with the most pressure in these first 2 or 3 months of SailGP in my mind is Stuart. I mean, what we talked about it when we spoke to him. And you're like, were you watching the final, going, oh yeah, go guys, but come second? I don't, because I've got to come into the winning boat now, the defending champions, and if they don't win, then I'm the difference. Now, I think if anyone's got broad enough shoulders or is realistic enough to know that sailing's there's a lot of variables, things can change around a bit. I think it's going to be hard, but yeah, that whole change with Draper heading over to Artemis, and then that sort of opening the door for Ian Jensen to go back to Australia, and then Great Britain thinking, okay, well, who's the option? I imagine maybe that was the way it played out, that the first piece to fall was Draper. That was then an easy switch for Jensen, and then GBR are like, okay, where are we going? Right, okay, for a few, we've got Stewart, that we can go find. But yeah, Draper, silky smooth, light wind guy, getting in with Nathan Outridge, silky smooth, light wind guy. So that, to me, I think they're going to be a very strong in that lighter to medium wind strength. Gooby and Tom, I mean, it's in theory a match made in heaven, but they're going to have to find each other. And I don't think they've sailed together before. I mean, it's it's just so much talent in one boat. But again, can you get all the players playing together, or is it going to be Lampard and Gerrard in the English midfield not quite working right, despite the fact it's all the talent that you could possibly have? We'll I guess see on that. And then I mean, Stewart's a phenomenal team guy. He's going to come in, he's going to bring that ethos, but I do think Dylan especially, is going to need to, for want of a better word, help him.
For sure.
And ease him into the team and make sure he understands how it works. And the British team, Emirates GBR, as good as the German Deutsche Bank were sailing mid to late season last year, the British were still a better team. So Stewart has got to upskill, and get better. Now, can he do that? I think he probably can. But these, what is interesting when you look at the first three events, Perth, Auckland, Sydney, probably going to be a decent bit of breeze at all those events. I mean, touch wood. But if you're looking at the calendar in general, that should be sort of the windy start. and I think that should suit Australia. It should suit the Blackfoils. It should suit Spain, France, some of these established windy weather teams. And if you're going to get your season, the start of the season is so important for confidence, isn't it? Like we look at USA, had a pretty disappointing, I'd say really disappointing first half of last season. Made some changes in the coach booth, changes on the boat, Mike Menninger coming in on the wing and things like that. They actually, in my opinion, did start to make some small improvements. And what I like was they looked at how can we walk up this hill rather than try and jump to the top risk continually falling off the edge. So I like their approach that their coach Marcus Lynch has brought into it and the way they're going about things. But they need to start getting some top results, don't they? So
there's a bit of pressure for sure.
I think there is a huge amount of pressure on them. I'd say probably that Eric Heil and that German team did a phenomenal job of at the end of the season, showed the potential they've got, but they've now lost Stewart. They've got Kevin Pepinay from the French team, which was probably the transfer that surprised me the most. But they maybe don't have quite as much pressure. But teams like USA, like Canada, those first few events this season, if they're not firing in results, then, what point do you start saying we've got to find more solutions and more answers to this? And you see the rosters, the US team have got Harry Melgis, a young, fast, sort of, foiling skiff sailor type athlete coming on to join as a reserve there. The French have got Enzo, as I alluded to, and neither of those examples I've used have actually had the time in F50 to see if they're any good at that. But they've proved themselves to have a lot of talent in other boats. When the teams start thinking this isn't working, and it could be pretty soon, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what you've kind of covered there. You've covered, obviously, Emirates Great Britain, Stu Bithell, the pressure at the top of ensuring that you continue to be a high performer, but you've also covered the lower teams in the league and the pressure to actually increase your performance and gain some positions. We'll touch on the expectations to finish off with then. Do you think that this transfer window has created a bigger divide, or has it leveled out the playing fields for 2026? Where do you think this is going to kind of net out?
What do I think? I think it has probably. I'd say last season we had a gold fleet at the top half and a bottom half. I don't think it's done a lot to change that. I think there could
Okay.
be a little bit of a divide. I look at like teams like the US. They've again, bear in mind these are all fantastic sailors, but are they fantastic F50 sailors? And that comes with having
Big
time
difference.
at it. Yeah, Mike Menninger's brilliant wing trimmer, but Ian Jensen's done it for 6 or 7 years. He's done it for 6 or 7 weeks. In terms of actual time on the tools, mid-season, so we could say 6 months, but they've not had a lot of time in the boat. So I think for that, like same with Brazil, they've got Cibello, they've got Rasmus Kostner come in on with Martini, got Paul Goodison around. It's a phenomenal bit of team, but not a lot of experience in an F50 just yet. So for those teams, it's how quickly can we get this training base in Pensacola up and running? I don't think it's actually until later in the season that there'll be a vote available, but they need the training time. They need to get into it. At the top of the table, I think, Australia, Great Britain, New Zealand, Spain, France. I just think Artemis are going to be straight into that group. Can Canada and Rockwool Denmark get themselves in
Make
that?
their way in, yeah.
They should be, but should's only what it is. You've got to go out and execute and deliver. And I think teams that had good seasons but were still around the middle, like the Swiss, like the Germans, who sort of found their feet towards the end of the season there. Where are they going to sit? With them, I genuinely don't know. I think they've shown they've got the talent to make finals. Can they keep that continuity and flow and make a few finals in a row? We'll see. But I think it could be fairly status quo at the top and the bottom.
I've got a big clickbaity question for you, Stevie. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Perfect. Here we go.
I want you to pick your top 3 for the league and your bottom 3 for season 6.
Okay. That's really horrible.
You don't have to give a reason.
I thought you were quite a nice guy. That's a horrendous start to the year.
We'll finish on this.
Okay. I'm going to go bottom 3. I'm going to say it will be US, will be Brazil, and yeah, I mean,
here we go.
Really, really tough. Could be the Germans having lost Stuart.
Okay, interesting.
No order on that. And do you know what? What I would say to all those teams that I've put in that thing is prove me wrong. I look forward to you doing that because I know that there's the talent on there to make those results happen. But that's just, I guess, how I see it at the moment. Top 3, going to be pretty boring here. And I'm going to say the top 3 at the end of the season will be, and in no order, will be the Bonds Flying Roos, will be the Black Foils. And then my surprise, but from what we've said on this whole podcast, probably isn't a surprise, is I would definitely say Artemis will make the final.
See, I had that down as well. That was my outside pick.
And you know what one I've forgotten, Alex? Sorry to interrupt. The one I do not know about, and that I feel a bit embarrassed we've perhaps not touched
France.
on. I've not touched it. No. I feel like I've touched on them, and I've said when it's windy, they're going to be really strong, and it'll be interesting how that new dynamic with Lee McMillan. He's a very strong character. That could be positive. I hope that doesn't make Contan shrink into his shell a little bit.
Yeah,
I think Contan needs to be made to feel big and confident. He's a confident kind of sailor, and I did actually get to race against him, luckily, and spend a bit of time with him. And when he's big and confident and strong, he's phenomenal sailor. But I have seen him also get a little bit nervous and a little bit unsure. So it'll be Lee's a very strong character, a lot of talent, a lot of skill, but can he get the best out of Contan with the French? But
that might be why I've seen on socials Contan's in his garage doing bench pressing at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there you go.
He's training ready for Lee McMillan.
Getting himself fired up. Exactly. No, what the team I do not know, and I think, and this is just the driver they've brought in is this in a nutshell, but is Red Bull Italy and Phil Robertson, because it went really under the radar, you know, kind of in some ways inevitably because we had a grand final to get into in Abu Dhabi, but they came second in Abu Dhabi with Phil coming straight in. Phil is, you know, he's a phenomenal character, but he really shoots from the hip, and he's that kind of guy, you know, who's sort of can pull a rabbit from a hat with a really good start here and there, but he can also get involved in a lot of chaos, and we saw how costly penalty points can be. So, you know, what's Phil gonna bring? But Phil, Kyle Langford, you know, they got Will Ryan in the team there now, like that Italian team, just quietly. But I've got no idea where to put them, because I don't think you can ever have any idea where Phil Robertson's going to go. You know, he's shooting and he's either hitting the can or he's missing miles wide. So they're going to be a really fun team to watch, that I'm sure of.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. We have Perth coming up very shortly, so keep your eyes peeled for that this weekend. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy Miami or wherever you are.
Yeah, Miami it is. Yeah, I'll do my best.
See you next time. Thanks, guys. See you soon.